4-year-old Cleo Smith was enjoying a family camping trip in Western Australia before she was tragically abducted in the dead of night. This is the case of Cleo Smith. If you haven't seen my face before, my name is Kylie and I cover true crime videos here on YouTube and over on TikTok as well. If you'd like to see more of my face, you can hit the subscribe button down below. But before we get into this case, I just want to give a quick disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anyone I mention or who might be impacted by today's case. All the information that I'm going to be sharing is readily available on the internet and I am just compiling it for educational purposes. With that being said, let's get into today's case. So Cleo Grace Smith was born in 2017 to parents Ellie Smith and Daniel Staines. However, not long after her birth, the pair would separate and Ellie began dating Jake Glidden. Jake was the perfect stepfather for Cleo and raised her as if she were his own child. A few happy years passed by and in 2021, the little family welcomed their second child, Isla Mae Glidden. Cleo was so excited to welcome her new baby sister and the pair quickly became inseparable. October rolled around and having finally settled into the dynamic of being a family of 4, Ellie and Jake decided to take their girls on a family camping trip for the weekend to spend some quality time together. The family lived in Carnarvon at the time, which is a relatively small town of Western Australia, just 50 minutes from the Quabba Blowholes where the family had decided to camp. Popular camping spot is located just by the seaside and looks absolutely gorgeous. So on October 15th, the family are super excited for their camping trip. They're getting all their camping gear together, packing up the car, and they set off on their road trip. They arrive at the Blowholes campsite at around 6:30 p.m. that day. They spend the evening together, setting up the tent, enjoying some food, and by 8 p.m. everyone is in bed. Ellie claims that around 1:30 a.m. that morning, Cleo woke up and asked her for a glass of water, which she gave. Cleo drank the water and went back to sleep. Everything was all good at this point. Now, around 4.5 hours later, at around 6 a.m. on the morning of the 16th of October, Ellie and Jake are waking up for the morning and Ellie decides to go and check on her daughters. Now, the tent they had been staying in is one of those tents where it has separate rooms inside it, so the parents had been sleeping in one room of the tent, which was separate to the room the kids were sleeping in. There was like a thin wall in between, but they were all in the same tent, if that makes sense. So different rooms, same tent. Ellie goes to unzip the side of the tent where her kids had slept. She walks over and immediately notices that both Cleo and her sleeping bag are missing, and the tent zipper to the outside is partially unzipped. Isla is still asleep, she's all good, but where is Cleo? Ellie quickly establishes that Cleo couldn't have left of her own accord because the zipper is positioned too high for her to have been able to reach and unzip, and there were no drag marks outside the tent. Now, because her sleeping bag is missing, this means that if Cleo left by herself, she would have had to carry the sleeping bag with her. This was one of those thermal, heavy-duty sleeping bags, and Ellie says there is no way that Cleo could have lifted this on her own. Ellie quickly rules that out straight away and knows that something is up. She goes to tell Jake that their daughter is missing, and the pair begin searching everywhere outside of the tent. They're calling out Cleo's name, looking behind bushes, anything they can think of. Sadly, with no luck, at around 6:23 a.m., Ellie phones the police to report her daughter missing. Police arrive by 7 a.m. and immediately begin the search for Cleo. They're using helicopters, divers, men on foot, everything they can to find this little girl. These exhaustive searches lasted into the night and unfortunately there was still no sign of Cleo anywhere. Hours turned into days and the family did multiple social media appeals, TV appeals, anything they could, begging for anyone that had any information to please come forward so they could get their little girl home. 5 days passed and it was formally announced to the public that police were treating this as an abduction. They announced a $1 million reward for anyone that had any information that might lead to the discovery of Cleo. There was extensive media coverage of Cleo's disappearance and the entire country was shaken, working desperately to solve this case and hopefully find Cleo alive. Hundreds of public leads were being followed until finally, on the 3rd of November, police received a tip-off about 36-year-old Terence Kelly. A neighbour had reported witnessing Terence buying diapers despite not having any children of his own. Now, thankfully, this neighbour found this suspicious enough to report to the police, especially with all the media coverage of Cleo's disappearance, the massive hunt to find whoever may have taken Cleo from her family. Now, Terence had already been on the police's radar as his phone had pinged off a cell tower in roughly the same location the family had been camping that night. Someone had also reported hearing loud screeching tires as a car left the campsite in the early hours of the morning. Thankfully, this additional information was enough to place an arrest on Terence Kelly. Police closed in on Terence while he was out doing some shopping. Meanwhile, authorities began a raid on Terence's home residence, where they would thankfully find Cleo alive and well. After 18 days of captivity, it was the news that no one had expected but that everyone had so desperately hoped for. Cleo was found alone in a bedroom. Shockingly, the house was just minutes from her home address in Carnarvon. Cleo was sitting on the floor playing with toys when police initially found her. The first officer to approach Cleo asked 3 times, "What is your name?" until finally Cleo spoke the words the entire country had been waiting for. "My name is Cleo." Family were promptly informed that she had been found, and I can't even imagine the emotions they must have felt at that time, knowing their baby girl was safe again and they were going to see her, bring her home. I can't even imagine the emotions this family must have gone through those 18 days. I mean, losing a 4-year-old girl and not knowing where she is, who she's with, it must have felt like a lifetime. I'm so thankful they were able to be reunited with their baby girl. Now, it appeared Cleo's hair had been cut and dyed pink during her disappearance, which police would later learn was Terence's way of attempting to recreate a living doll which he could dress up and play with. Terence Kelly had a concerning obsession with dolls, Bratz dolls in particular, as entire walls of the home where Cleo was found were covered from floor to roof in his collection of children's toys. It's alleged that this obsession may have driven him to take Cleo to begin with, as he was looking for someone who looked doll-like. Terence attempted to add her to his collection. Despite the girl's young age, Terence would often leave her home alone, locked in a bedroom, while he went out to do things such as shopping and attending meetings. When Terence was home, supposedly he gave Cleo more freedom, allowing her to roam through the house as long as she didn't leave. Cleo has since insisted there was a woman who brushed her hair during her time in captivity. However, there was no evidence to support the involvement of anyone but Terence in this abduction. It is thought that perhaps Cleo had mistaken Terence for a woman due to his longer hair, or possibly even that Terence had dressed himself in women's clothing as he attempted to act out his fantasies of playing dolls together. Terence Kelly openly admitted to this abduction, claiming he would sometimes hit Cleo if she was being too sassy. He had also attempted to restrain Cleo at one point by tying her to a chair with sticky tape. However, he claimed she was a bit of a fighter, and this attempt ultimately failed. Terence would also play extremely loud music throughout the house to silence Cleo's cries for help. Now, Terence Kelly faced a sentence of up to 20 years in prison. However, his defense team claimed he was too mentally unwell to comprehend the gravity of his actions. Terence was only sentenced to 13 years and 6 months behind bars for the abduction of Cleo Smith. Now, while I don't condone any of Terence's actions or his sentence, I do think it's important to look into the background of the perpetrator to get more of an understanding of their background and what may have led to them committing those crimes to begin with. So Terence Kelly was born sometime in 1985 into a very unstable environment. Terence's parents suffered severe alcohol and substance addictions and would often give Terence himself alcohol in his baby bottles before abandoning him at the age of 2 years old. Terence was then placed in the care of his biological auntie, Penny Walker. Throughout school, Terence suffered severe hearing and speech problems. He did have hearing aids, but he refused to wear them due to being bullied by the other students, which breaks my heart. No one should be bullied for anything. Terence was raised in a highly physical environment and would often witness his uncles engaging in physical fights that would result in injuries to everyone involved. By the age of 12, Terence was struggling constantly with wetting the bed and had nightmares almost every night. He began developing severe suicidal thoughts and was hospitalized as a result. These thoughts and feelings continued throughout Terence's childhood, and by the time he entered high school, he was expelled due to his aggressive and disruptive behavior towards the other students. He was severely beaten by his father as a punishment for this. Growing into adulthood, Terence was diagnosed with multiple psychological disadvantages, including paranoia, depression, anxiety, PTSD, narcissistic traits, and possible fetal alcohol syndrome. Terence desperately longed to have a family of his own. However, due to his lack of social skills and self-isolation, this was not able to become a reality. Terence began creating an imaginary family for himself to fill this void, going as far as to create fake social media accounts for his fake wife and children. Terence would use random images off the internet and pretend these were his family, making posts about his amazing family life despite living and being alone 100% of the time. Now, it's thought at the time of the abduction, Terence had been high on methamphetamine and had simply been looking for personal belongings and possibly money to steal from the campsite. However, upon seeing Cleo's sleeping figure, he acted on impulse and decided to make his fantasies a reality. After being found, Cleo did of course undergo mental and physical assessments. However, there did not appear to be an evident sexual nature to this crime. At least there was no physical evidence or signs that Cleo was harmed in this way. And so the judge in this instance decided to grant Terence a lower sentence due to his traumatic upbringing combined with the fact that he was pretty quick to admit to his crimes after being arrested. My thoughts are that yes, he admitted to the crime as soon as he was arrested. However, there was still 18 days before that he could have turned himself in and chose not to. Who knows what his intentions might have been long term or what may have happened if police didn't intervene when they did. But I just want to end this case focusing on the real victim, which is Cleo Smith. Cleo was an innocent, bubbly, and happy little girl. She loved spending time with her little sister and her family, which was exactly what she was doing when she was taken. Cleo has now been returned to her loving family, and they could not have been happier to see their little girl again. Despite being able to thankfully escape this horrible situation, Cleo will continue to be impacted by those traumatic 18 days away from her family. That would have been hard for anyone, but especially a 4-year-old, not knowing why or how you've been taken from your family or if you are ever going to see your home again. That must have been so terrifying and something no one should ever have to experience. Her parents have shared that Cleo still has constant nightmares about that time with Terence, and I truly hope that she is getting the help she needs to work through those difficult emotions. Cleo was so innocent and was taken from her family tent where she should have felt safe and protected. Honestly, I have no words. What this little girl went through breaks my heart, and I don't think any length of prison sentence for the perpetrator can take that away. So that brings us to the end of today's case. I know it can be especially hard to listen to cases about children, so please go and watch something happy after this video. But don't forget to leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments, and of course let me know what cases you want to hear from me next, and I will see you all in my next one.